through the first couple of items.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's meeting of the North East Scotland Transport Partnership. I'll just start the agenda item 1.1 of membership changes. Councillor John Crawley has stepped down from the board and he has been replaced by Councillor Alan Turner. I think I speak for the whole board when I thank Councillor Crawley for his time on the board and for his work as chair of Nestrans. Moving on to item 1.2, we now move to the appointment of a new chair. And as sort of a baptism of fire, I'd like to nominate Councillor Turner to be the new chair. Do I have a seconder? I see Councillor Davidson. Can we agree on the new chair? Agreed, and we'll now take a few seconds just to let Councillor Turner take over the chair itself. Thank you. Apologies, Councillor Mayor, I saw your hand up now. Sorry.
I was just taking it down.
Oh, it's down. That's fine.
Baptism of fire. I'll have to remember that. Well, I guess thank you very much for your confidence in electing me as chair. I'll say that right away. Without, I guess, further ado, move on to item 1.3, which is declarations of interest and transparency statements. If I can ask if there are any declarations of interest, could you please put your hand up and I will bring you in. Yeah. Okay, that's good for a start. I don't see any. So we'll move on to the minute of the previous board meeting on the 21st of June 2023. Obviously, I wasn't there, so I will ask the people that were there, is the minute a true reflection of what actually happened in the meeting? And if there's any questions or whatnot, please raise your hand and I'll bring you in. Oh, yep, agreed. I see no hands, so I take it minutes agreed. Thank you. Okay, item 2. It's a presentation from ScotRail update. Ewan Tate, if we could ask Mr. Tate to give us the presentation, please.
Thank you, Councillor Turner, and congratulations on your appointment as chair. So I have some slides. If you just give me a moment, I'll put them up on the screen. So just while they load, I just wanted to come and give you a quick update on things that have been going on the ScotRail network and some of the plans that we have for the timetable change in December. You just give me a moment. Technology is misbehaving today. Try that again. There we go.
We can see that first slide.
Yeah, there we go. It's just brought everything up. Cool. So as I said, want to just give you a quick update on passenger demand, talk a little bit about the number of people that we're seeing travelling in the northeast of Scotland, talk to you a bit about the timetable changes that we've got planned in December, and then I'll touch on the Peak Fares trial as well at the end. I don't have a slide, but also worth noting, we issued a press release yesterday. We got an updated set of results on customer satisfaction from Transport Focus, independent body who hold the transport industry to account, and are out talking to customers about what they, how they view the transport network. They found that 91% of people, 91% of customers surveyed who use ScotRail are satisfied with ScotRail. And that was an increase up from I think it was 86% in the previous period that they reported. So it's great to see that people are starting to have a bit more confidence, starting to find that we're doing a good job for them. So in terms of passenger demand, I've split this north of Aberdeen and south of Aberdeen. So south of Aberdeen includes all services between Aberdeen and Glasgow, Aberdeen and Edinburgh, and Aberdeen to Montrose. On the left is 2019-2020, and on the right is 2023-2024. And period 6 is the most recent period, which is the 4-week period that ended just last week. As you can see, the yellow bar, the yellow line is off-peak travel. Off-peak travel in the northeast is still suppressed a bit compared to where we were pre-pandemic. And then peak and commuter is much the same. We're still not seeing the same levels of growth as we're seeing in other parts of the country. For clarity, commuter is customers who are using a season ticket or a flexi pass, whilst peak is customers who are buying a peak time day ticket for travel on the day. So we're seeing consistently across the network that peak travel looks about the same, but commuter as it was in 2019-2020, but commuter travel is significantly down. And what we're seeing is fewer customers are buying season tickets. Previously, it was largely business travellers, people going to meetings in Aberdeen or Dundee would be buying a train ticket on the day. And that was our kind of peak business market. That seems to have changed now. It's commuters who are travelling maybe once a week buying tickets. So season tickets and FlexiPass is very much in decline at the moment, or hasn't recovered. I split out north of Aberdeen. North of Aberdeen looks great. There's loads more people travelling, but I would caveat that by noting we had a significant engineering blockade north of Aberdeen in 2019-2020. So that suppressed demand significantly during that period. So that's not really a true reflection on the number of people who have come back, or the rate of recovery. So December timetable change is approaching. We're proposing a number of changes on the Dundee to Inverurie corridor for 2 reasons. First of all, as I noted, customer demand hasn't recovered as quickly as we'd like. We've been out reviewing how busy services are coming into Aberdeen in the peaks. And we think there's still a significant over provision of capacity. And performance has not been great. Our intercity trains in particular, we're not able to get as many out in service on a daily basis as we have planned. And when an intercity train isn't available, we have to take one of the diesel trains, usually from a local service. Quite often the Montrose Aberdeens get cancelled so that we can run the intercity train instead. So that means, customers who are on the intercity train only have 2 carriages. Customers commuting in from Lawrence, Kirk or Portlethen into Aberdeen in the morning find that their train is cancelled. And all in all, it's not a great place for us to be. So what we've done is we've looked at the timetable and we've tried to focus on protecting service frequency. We've tried to focus on protecting and enhancing connectivity, but that comes at the expense of journey time. So I'll start with Dundee. I appreciate Dundee is out with the Tactran area, but the changes that we're making on the Dundee Arbroath corridor do impact services from Aberdeen to the Central Belt. So we currently run an hourly local service between Dundee and Arbroath. What we're going to do is remove every second train. So we'll have a local service every 2 hours. And then the Glasgow to Aberdeen service will pick up the local calls between Dundee and Arbroath instead. So customers who travel from these stations, Carnoustie, Montefieth, will still have a train every hour, albeit it won't be on a 60-minute interval. It creates new journey opportunities. So Carnoustie to Aberdeen will have a much better service, but it does come at the cost of increasing journey time slightly between Aberdeen and Glasgow. These changes in their entirety will increase the average journey time by about 4 or 5 minutes between Aberdeen and Glasgow. But it does mean there'll be less risk of cancellations, and that's the big problem we've been seeing. And on the Montrose to Aberdeen corridor, it's much the same. We currently run an hourly service between Montrose, Aberdeen and Inverurie, additional peak services. We've reviewed the peak timetable. We're removing some of the Montrose to Aberdeen services, and calls are being added into the intercity service in its place. So again, customers will still have, there'll still be a roughly hourly service between Lawrence, Kirk and Portlethen and Aberdeen. They won't be on a standard 60-minute interval because sometimes it's in the intercity or sometimes it's a local service. But that does mean that there'll be new journey opportunities, providing more direct journeys between communities in Aberdeenshire to Angus, Dundee and Glasgow. And as I said, these changes have an overall increase in average journey time between Aberdeen and Glasgow, about 4 to 5 minutes. And then between Aberdeen and Inverurie, we currently provide 3 to 4 trains per hour in the peaks, 2 to 3 trains per hour in the off-peak. We've reviewed the peak timetable, removing a handful of services in the peaks. And in hours where there's quite often there's 3 trains an hour in the off-peak, some of those extra trains are being removed from the timetable. So customers will still see, sorry, that third bullet point is wrong. I'm sorry, I've just copied this from a previous slide. So customers between Inverurie and Aberdeen will still have 2 trains an hour in the off-peak, and I think 3 trains an hour in the peak. And these changes will help improve reliability of services south of Aberdeen by releasing rolling stock. So in numbers, as I said, we focused on protecting and maintaining local journey opportunities and creating new journey opportunities. So if you travel from Portlethen to Aberdeen, you currently have 41 services per day. That will be 39 services per day in the December timetable. If you travel from Lawrence, Kirk, 40 increases slightly to 41. And then Montrose and Stonehaven have a slight reduction, but that's because some of the intercity services already called at those stations. And we'll have new journey opportunities. So Portlethen to Dundee goes from 7 trains per day to 19 trains per day. Most of those services extend beyond Dundee to Glasgow. So creating and improving the long distance journey opportunities from those communities. And then Aberdeen to Inverurie goes from 74 services per day to 63. And there's a loss of some of the through connectivity as well between Montrose and Inverurie. So Montrose to Inverurie goes from 24 trains per day to 14 trains per day. So that's the bulk of the change in the northeast. Looking ahead to 2024, we're looking at how we can increase the number of 5-coach HSTs, provide more capacity on our intercity services. But this timetable will remain in place until the Aberdeen Central Belt project delivers more capacity on the corridor. And my final slide, as you'll have seen in the news, we're launching a 6-month trial on lifting peak time restrictions on off-peak tickets. That begins on Monday, 2nd of October, continues until Friday, 29th of March. I think it's actually Sunday, 1st of October until Sunday, 31st of March, but there's no peak restrictions at the weekends, so Monday to the Friday there. Customers can go and check the website and see how much their train will now, how much the train will now cost. But essentially, the off-peak ticket will be valid all day. However, we're not reducing the price of season tickets at FlexiPass. What we're advising customers is that if it's cheaper to buy tickets on a daily basis on the days that they travel, then that's the best way to do that. We also offer a limited number of super off-peak tickets. These are online tickets, and typically in the Central Belt, those have been removed. So effectively, it's one price all day long. And we'll be monitoring demand over the next 6 months and looking at how we can respond where we can to increase in the number of people who are traveling. If there's an increase, when there's an increase in the number of people traveling, and which services are getting busy. So I'm happy to take any questions. I'll take the slides off so I can see everybody, so you can see me. But
Councillor Reid, Glenn.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Ewan, for your presentation. I have a few questions, if you don't mind. Very interesting what's happening there. See on the slide, it was Monday to Friday. You were showing the services. You didn't touch on Saturday to Sunday. Currently, there's not many trains running on a Sunday that we actually see up here. So, is it pro rata over the weekend first and foremost, or do you have that information that you could share? Secondly, the Aberdeen to Inverurie daily service, you were saying something like 74 down to 63 per day. There are some of those trains that don't stop at some stations, e.g. sometimes they won't stop at Kintore, etc. Will that change to pick up to make up for the loss in some services at all? If you don't mind, answering those two questions.
Yeah. So the Sunday timetable isn't impacted by these changes. The Saturday timetable is based around the Monday to Friday timetable, so we're not doing anything different on a Saturday. It's just that Saturday timetable tends to be a little bit different in the peak, so the numbers always tend to be a little bit different. So I've just run it off for Monday to Friday, but it's the same concept on a Saturday. In terms of as you note, there's a handful of services between Aberdeen and Inverurie and Inverness that don't call at I think Kintore. That won't change. We're not adding the Kintore services, Kintore calls back in, or not adding the Kintore calls in. The Kintore calls are skipped on a handful of services due to I think it's Inverness trains specifically that there's a couple of Kintore calls that are missed, and it's because we can't make the timetable work with the single track between Inverurie and Inverness. So when we build it all together, we have to leave those calls out, unfortunately.
Thanks, Ewan. That is, a wee bit of a disappointment. Final question, if you don't mind. Will there be any change to the times of the first trains and the last trains? The late night service is very popular, especially at the weekend.
I'm not 100% sure off the top of my head, but if I can follow up with you afterwards. will
Yeah, I
double
appreciate
check
that.
for
Thank you. Yeah, because I know you're saying that there'll still be 1 hour in various times, etc. But I mean, it could be that it's 11:01 instead of being like 11 whatever kind of thing, and that people would be very disappointed with that.
Yeah, I don't think there's any significant change in terms of first and last trains, but let me just double check those times for you.
Thanks so much, Ian.
Okay, Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I wondered if there were any work done around those who don't use trains. It's great that your scorecard has come out very well of those that do, but it's sometimes those who don't. I don't know if there's been any work around that from ScotRail. Secondly, I did just was slightly concerned that the intercity trains seem to be benefiting a bit more, and Crossrail, which has been of huge benefit to the city of Aberdeen, might be missing out a little just in that kind of overall look of things. I don't know if you would agree with that. But and thirdly, just on the actual tickets, it did seem to me that there might almost be a phasing out of traditional season tickets, but given this the plan is just from October to March, will there be then a drive to go back to season tickets, or do you just feel, Ewan, that that's maybe a thing of the past?
So in terms of ticketing, this is the first time we've done a trial of anything like this in the UK. So we're really excited to see what the outcome will be. It's badged as a trial. We'll be reviewing how customers use the railway, and from that, the Scottish Government will be able to decide what they want to do in the future. Season tickets are a GB-wide product rather than a ScotRail exclusive. So I'm not aware of any plans at a national level to get rid of season tickets. And we obviously also we offer Flexi Pass, which is a discounted ticket for people who travel maybe a couple of times a week, for people to give something to make it a little bit cheaper for those who are traveling regularly, but not on a daily basis, 5 days a week. So it's very much a case of wait and see at the moment. In terms of Crossrail, so yes, some of the there is a loss in the Cross Aberdeen connectivity. I'm not sure I'd say that the intercity service is benefiting from this. Aberdeen to the Central Belt, certainly if you're travelling from Aberdeen to Glasgow, average journey time is going up slightly. But what we've tried to do is maintain the local connectivity between Montrose, Stonehaven, Lawrence Kirk, Portlethen and Aberdeen. That has the side effect of improving long distance connectivity for those communities, albeit it wasn't the principal reason for making the changes. I'm sorry, you had a third question.
I did. It was around has there been any work done on those who don't actually use the trains at the moment, on why they don't use them? And I guess just following on from what you said about journey times, my understanding is the City Region Deal outcome for the improvements to the line was the main one was to cut journey times. So just by changing the timetable, it seems to have made it worse. So I'm still trying to get my head around that one, but it's different aspects of it. But yeah, it was really about also who doesn't use the trains.
So in terms of customers who don't use the train, so we are doing a lot of work trying to understand, essentially, what is our market? Who are we? How many people? We've done a bit of work to understand, market awareness of ScotRail as a brand. Reality is, I think the work that we've done 95% of people in Scotland are aware of ScotRail. I don't think that would be a surprise to anyone here. And then I think it's about 50-60% of our customers only use us once a month to once a year, and that's the market that we're really trying to look at, to understand why do they not want to travel by train, and how do we encourage them to come and use our service. You know, there are some people who won't use rail because there isn't a timetable doesn't suit, or because they don't live near a railway station. But there are certainly people out there who choose to drive that who could be travelling by train, and that's exactly the market that we're looking to tap into. In terms of journey times, the Aberdeen City Region deal and the Aberdeen to Central Belt Enhancement Project. The Aberdeen Central Belt Enhancement Project will deliver a reduction in journey time. The timetable that we're putting, the timetable from December is, I'm hesitant to use the word temporary. Temporary suggests that it's only for a short period, but the timetable change in December will be until the Aberdeen Central Belt Enhancement Project delivers its journey times, and then we'll be able to look at taking those local calls out of the intercity services again.
Councillor no, hold on. You were Councillor Hutchinson.
Thank you, Jay. It was just to ask, and it's kind of following on from a couple of questions we had earlier. You've mentioned about moving stops from onto the intercity services, and you mentioned in response to Councillor Reid about the train not stopping at Kintoras frequently. I'm just wondering, kind of given the kind of timeline we're looking at for this change being in place, if there were to be new train stations delivered within that within the local area, would that be able to be accommodated within that timetable, or would we kind of have to wait until how that might fit, if that makes sense?
That's something that would probably require a bit of a detailed look. It's not something I can answer just now, I'm afraid. We need to go away and look at the timetable and see what the impact would be of adding in additional calls if new stations are built south of Aberdeen and over the next 4 years.
If you could provide an update just when some sort of kind of detail at some point, that would be very welcome. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor McClellan, thank you for waiting.
No problem. Thank you, Chair. I guess thanks to Mr. Ewan for the presentation. However, I think it is concerning that we're decreasing the local services and essentially moving them onto the intercity. We want to be making trains as appealing as possible, and I don't necessarily think that will achieve that. I guess it's about what considerations being given to that. I think in terms of the post-pandemic period that we're living in, obviously there's now a higher prevalence of working from home, etc., which will have contributed to the decrease in journeys being taken by train. But do they believe that by implementing these changes and lessening the capacity and increasing the journey times to the central belt, we will incentivise people to get out their car and choose to travel by rail? And as he said, see an increase in passenger numbers, which will then lead to these being reversed. Thanks.
So one of the challenges we've got at the moment, especially with the Montrose to Aberdeen services, is poor reliability. I'm inclined to believe that cancelling the cancelling of services will have a more detrimental impact to encouraging people to travel by train than adding the calls into the intercity services. We're really keen that we can provide a service that people can rely on. First and foremost, we want people to know that if they go to the train station when the timetable says there's a train, that a train will show up. It's really disappointing that we've not been able to improve the reliability of our intercity trains. And that's where we're ending up with the cancellations on Montrose Aberdeen services. We are doing a lot of work to improve the reliability of the intercity trains. This isn't just a case of, you know, this is the easy answer and we'll do that rather than fixing the trains. We absolutely are trying to improve reliability of our intercity trains. There's an improvement program in place, looking at the various challenges we've got, such as we've got a vacancy gap at the maintenance depot in Edinburgh. So we're looking at how we can recruit more staff. Recruiting more staff is a long and slow process. You know, it's not an overnight job to recruit someone and then train them up so that they're competent in maintaining these trains. So yeah, people look for different things from the timetable. We still get complaints about the lack of direct trains between Aberdeenshire, the local stations in Aberdeenshire and the Central Belt. You know, it wasn't the primary reason we made these changes, but it is one of the benefits, which will make the service a little bit more appealing for people who are making these longer distance journeys.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Ewan, for that. I guess I take on board what you've said around the reliability and the fact that when people attend a station, they obviously expect a train. But I guess it's about the passenger numbers, and by making the longer journeys longer, I appreciate what you're saying around the increase in direct journeys from Aberdeenshire to the Central Belt. But Aberdeen is the larger population base, and I think, you know, in terms of sort of the reliability, that's obviously an issue, and can't be sorted overnight. But how? I mean, I don't think that by adding to journey times, we're going to incentivise people to get out their car and move to travelling by rail. So I think that needs to obviously be sorted. Increasing journey times isn't going to get folk onto trains, really. So I think overall it is disappointing. I guess just one final question, Chair. In terms of the slides, am I right in thinking there's no change to the Edinburgh route? It's only Glasgow's trains that are being burdened with the additional time. I'm conscious they are longer in the first instance anyway.
There might be the majority of the calls have been added to the Glasgow trains. There might be one or two changes in the evening on the Edinburgh trains, but the kind of core timetable will see the calls added to Glasgow services. Yeah, that's.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to pick up on some of the points that was actually raised by Councillor Reid, and also add to it in terms of what you've actually talked about in terms of Montrose. So my questions, and I'll paint a scenario here. We're changing the timetables in December, which is, you know, it's more likely to be bad weather than what it is in the summertime. And, you know in my own ward, we've got a number of elderly people who will travel and they will use the rail to travel. And Montrose is actually a changing point if they have to change trains, etc., to come back, if they're coming back to, say, Lawrencekirk, Stonehaven, Portletton. And what I'm wondering at is late night. What time do the stations close in terms of access to waiting rooms, toilets, facilities, and how does that match with your new timetable? So if someone has to come off one train, they don't have to stand outside in the cold for an hour and a half or whatever to catch the next one at Montrose. Thank you.
So the timetable will increase the number of direct journey opportunities. So if you're travelling to Lawrencekirk or Portletton, you'll have more direct trains to Dundee, and as a consequence to Glasgow. So there'll be more choice for customers who would rather not change trains. In terms of changes to staffing at staff hours at Montrose, there's no changes planned to that. The timetable won't add any new times when customers are likely to interchange. I know that there is a late night connection after the station is closed up. I'm not sure if that's removed, but there certainly won't be anything additional.
Okay. Okay. Yes. I will let Councillor Radley in. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I just have a quick question. Obviously, as part of Nestrans, we look at the wider sort of transport network, not just rail. Have there been any conversations between ScotRail and, for example, the local bus companies who do time some of their services to coincide with trains arriving and departing? Has there been any sort of wider conversation around connectivity wider across the network?
As we finalise the timetables, we'll start to engage with the bus operators. It's something we've been looking at how we can improve on. And last year we were sharing our timetable change summary with the bus operators much earlier than we have done in the past. So we'll be doing that in the next few weeks.
Thank you, that's helpful. Chair, I've just got one more question. And I guess it's around the timing. I did miss the start of your presentation. I do apologise for that. Is it towards the start of December that these changes will come into play, or is it towards the end of December? I'm just conscious around Christmas and the certainty of travel around Christmas shopping and the connectivity that's needed between Shire locations, but also to the major cities of Dundee and Aberdeen and further afield around the sort of Christmas holidays. So could that be clarified? Is that possible?
Yes. All right. So it's the timetable change dates are national. So it's not ScotRail who decides when to change the timetable in December. It's a national date set by Network Rail and the whole rail industry. And I have to admit, I kind of take it for granted that everybody knows when the timetable change happens. Of course, that's not the case. So the timetable change is Sunday, the 10th of December, 2023 this year. So Sunday, the 10th of December.
Okay, I see no more hands, no more indications. So I'm going to thank you on behalf of the board here for your presentation, Mr. Tate. Thank you
for having me.
Okay. With that, we will move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the 2023 budget matters, item 3.1. And if I could ask Ella Stott to lead the way.
Thank you, Chair. This budget matter report provides an update on Nestrans budget monitoring for 23-24 and forecast outcome position. Appendix 1 sets out the summary monitoring to the end of August 23 with a total expenditure budget of 7.458 million and year-to-date spend is 1.135 million. And there are detailed requirements for approval in Appendix 2. Now, there is a delay in completing the partnership's annual accounts for 22-23, and the board will be updated in the next meeting when we have a target date confirmed. Regarding the pension discretion policy, the date of implementation is still yet to be agreed. NSPF have confirmed that the current policy can remain in place until a new one is received. Regarding the strategic transport fund, the current balance is 496,000. There are still 16 developments to be claimed from the fund. There's no claims made so far in 23-24. There are 5 recommendations. So note the monitoring position and forecast presented in Appendix 1. Approve the environments set out in Appendix 2. Note the update regarding completion of the annual accounts 22-23. Note the update on the pension discretion policy and note the strategic transport fund position. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I don't Don't see any raised hands. Oh, sorry, I do. Apologies, Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you very much. Can I ask what ITTs are? It's an acronym that I just wasn't aware of, first of all.
Chair, can I come in there? It's integrated travel towns. So there are, I believe, 6 declared integrated travel towns across Aberdeenshire, and they're looking at introducing a further 6 in the coming years. I don't. Martin is here from Aberdeenshire, who's led on those projects. I don't know if he wants to add any detail around them. One in each area within Aberdeenshire, I believe. Martin.
Thanks, Rob. I'm delighted that you pay attention to the updates that we give you. So that's absolutely spot on. It's just it's an active travel, sustainable travel plan for each of the towns that we've created the plans for. And it's a mix of what we call civil infrastructure, but also soft interventions around changing travel behaviour.
Thanks. That's very helpful. I just wasn't aware what that was, and it's obviously something that you know more about in the Shire than we perhaps do in the city. It was also to ask around putting some more into the South College Street Queen Elizabeth roundabout, the phase 2 review, and it was really just to ask about the timing on that piece of work. Thanks.
Thanks. I'll try and answer it, but maybe Claire might have to step in. It's some additional funding. There's some extra measures that are being looked at the other side of the roundabout. They were just given it's either side of the bridge. They were going to look at impacts upstream, and they were going to look in more detail at some active travel measures and go out to public consultation. So it has extended the period of the study. The consultation as well, I think it'll be after the October school holidays now, so possibly coming back to Aberdeen City Council, I would guess, around Christmas time. Sure.
Thank you. It was just, I just did wonder if that was going to stretch the project envelope for phase 2.
Thanks through you, Chair. Yeah, Councillor MacDonald, as Ms Anderson has said, that will be reported back to NetSet committee, I imagine. I don't know that we've got a specific date to report that back on, but we do have public consultation plans and are undertaking further work in terms of phase 2 actively at the moment.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Mayor, Doreen.
Thank you. Yes, under regional transport strategy, there's quite a lot of underspend, and considering the year to date, are we confident that those figures are going to be met? And is there a reason for, nothing being spent in a certain area up till now? And my other question is, and this is just me being a bit, daft maybe, coordination and project development. We have an awful lot of projects listed in there where there is no budget against them. I'm wondering whether we shouldn't take those out and include in a separate, future project something plan, or because at the moment we've got some which are project which have budgets, and then there's a whole heap with no budgets.
Rob.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Mayor. In terms of regional transport strategy, basically the revenue part of the budget, yes, we believe that we're on target to bring forward and use that element of the budget over the coming year. A lot of the projects have started but not yet been billed. On the coordination project development, the capital side of the budget, that's all of the headings that are within our regional transport strategy. And I think it's important to emphasise that some of them have significant work ongoing are either being funded elsewhere. A good example is the Aberdeen Rapid Transit, which is being funded through the government's Bus Partnership Fund. And that's picked up in the partner contributions in the latter part of Appendix 1 below. So, yeah, it looks a little odd, but I think for completeness, it's probably appropriate that they are continued to be shown. There are other important areas such as freight, which we think is a really significant element of the regional transport strategy, but one that the funding is being delivered through the city region deal, for example, and Paul will talk a little bit about that when we come to the freight item on the agenda. So I think for completeness, that there is method in the madness, but I do appreciate it does look a little odd, but quite happy to sort of try and explain that a little bit further. But it does always refer back to the approved regional strategy from November 21 approval.
Doreen, you happy enough there?
Yeah, that's fine. It's just a bit confusing when you don't have a budget against a project and you're trying to figure out where the money is going to come from.
Okay, I see no more indications to come in, and Ellie, I know you actually gave us the recommendations as well, so do I take it we're in agreement with the recommendations? Great. Okay. So our next item on the report is item 4.1. It's the director's report, and it's Rab that's presenting.
Thank you, Chair. As you say, item 4.1 is a report mostly on meetings and liaison that has gone on since the last meeting of the board. It's there to give you an idea of the types of involvement we've had, the liaison and meetings, particularly with the Scottish Government, Transport Scotland and others. And we try to give a little bit of information about the key elements that are being brought forward. You can see, for example, we have a regular meeting with ScotRail. Ewan Tate, who's just delivered to you, does meet with us on I think a quarterly basis, along with Transport Scotland, Network Rail and other train operators. So some of the questions that have been picked up on today, we'll make sure that we take to that regular meeting and get responses which we'll bring back to future meetings of the board. I mentioned one there on the 7th of July. I attended the Airport Consultative Committee. Maggie is actually our nominated rep, but I subbed for her. But I've summarised very briefly that passenger numbers at the airport are recovering well, I think was the phrase used by the managing director. The park and depart long stay car park has now reopened. All car parks at the airport are now cashless. And to mention that there's a new electric shuttle bus now available free of charge from the long stay car park, as well as a hotel hopper bus service, which has been introduced. The electric shuttle bus from the long stay car park, I should say, includes free drop off. So if your taxi or if your friends are dropping you at the airport, there is an opportunity to be dropped at the long stay free of charge without paying the entry fee and catch the shuttle bus. And I think the airport are keen to encourage that, because I know there has been some criticism around the drop-off charge. At Appendix 1, I've included a note of the Health and Transport Action Plan Steering Group, which was held on the 31st of August and is chaired by Jerry Donald. So it's there for members' information, but potentially if Jerry wants to add anything, obviously there would be an opportunity to do that. And I also wanted to pick up that on the 6th of September, Councillor Turner attended, along with myself, the meeting of the 7 chairs of the regional transport partnerships across Scotland. Although in a status of pending chair or chair-elect, I think it was really useful to have you there, Councillor, so appreciate that as well. The number of meetings identified there that are coming up in the month or so to come, but happy to take any comments or questions on any of them if members wish. Thank you.
So, Councillor Reid, Glenn.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Rab, for the report. I don't know if other members are of a similar opinion to myself, but I was really interested to see the Health and Transport Action Plan there, the minutes, etc., of the meeting. Since I've been a member of Nestrans, I've not really seen too much about this. I'm really keen to find out what the aims and objectives are. I wonder whether we could possibly get a report back to Nestrans so we can fully discuss it. There'll be different things, obviously, city councillors are looking for and shire ones are looking for. I mean, in my own constituency, we have issues with one large town that no longer has a bus connection straight to the hospital. I've got two satellite towns just outside the city that elderly people have to get 2 buses to get to their GP surgery, and it involves them waiting 30-40 minutes in a street in Aberdeen, etc. So yeah, what I'd be looking for, and I'm hoping this is part of the aims of the group, is that we actually we get better connectivity between e.g. GP surgeries, hospitals, etc. So I'd really welcome a paper on this, and we could feed into it. I don't know if that's possible.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Reid. It's almost as though it was a set question, because I can say, yes, we're hoping to bring back reports to future meetings. We always do an annual report, which comes to this this body, which goes to NHS Grampian Board and goes to the community planning partnerships through the joint health and social care partnerships. So the annual report will be coming to you hopefully soon. We are also currently undertaking a review of the action plan, which I think we're calling HTAP 3. It will be our 3rd edition of Health and Transport Action Plan, and it would be our intention to bring that to this meeting. I think probably in a workshop style session before it was finalised would be the most effective. We do work currently through 2 subgroups, so one on public health and the other on access to health and social care, which I think is the point you're picking up particularly there, Glenn. So the subgroup is very active, includes the councils, is chaired by Paul Finch from the Nestrans team, includes various representatives across NHS Grampian, and I think is making significant progress in a very difficult landscape of getting people to appointments wherever we can, and as effectively and cost effectively as we can. So, but the answer is certainly to your question of can we bring a report back? Yes, absolutely.
Councillor Davidson, Isabel.
Yeah, I think, Glenn, I knew you have stolen my thunder, really unsurprisingly. So it was really on the same thing. Certainly my constituent, Sunel in the district, there's no local vaccinations, and a lot of testing and things has to be done in other places, and people find it really difficult. Vaccination centres are not on bus routes on the whole, so it could be really tough for people to get access to services. So I wonder how available this is. I think it's quite limited, and it'd be good to get more information. I believe there are conferences now and then, but it's not something that I have any sight of. So it would be good. I see there's one public representative who wasn't able to attend that meeting, and I wonder if there are generally more public representatives, or how they gather information from the public to feed in, to find out what the barriers are to people accessing health. So it'll be really interesting to get a bit more information about this. Thank you.
Thanks for that. There is only one public representative, Ginny.
She does live in the wilds.
In Fortescue, yep. She lives in the wilds, but she's very active. She's been a huge addition actually to the HTAP steering group. In terms of access and the difficulties around access, yeah, very much that's one of the areas that is discussed, and we do whatever we can to bring forward solutions. So not just about discussion, but actually what can be done to improve things. It's worth saying, I think, that Grampian is the only area of Scotland that has a health and transport coordinating group of this nature. We employ a full-time project manager who has occasionally done reports to this group in Andrew Stewart. And one of the initiatives that we've put in place is called the Transport to Health Information Centre, or THINC, THINC. And in particular, that's an opportunity for people to get information on transport options that are available. I appreciate where there aren't transports available, that's where the real problems are. But THINC does give us the opportunity to collate information on where there are gaps in service as well, and can signpost to volunteers and to charity groups that provide transport for those most in need. So yeah, a lot there, and hopefully we're making some progress on that. And as I say, the only area of Scotland that has something of this nature that we're aware of.
Councillor MacDonald.
It was to ask a question around Baines Coaches, Chair, and the relationship now with the North East Bus Alliance, and you know, where things stand at the moment. I did see a bus going along the Esplanade about 10 days ago, and I'm sure it's been discussed in the Shire, but it was just to see in the context of Nestrans and the Alliance, because I noted in the progress report as well that there are some projects that, you know, we've helped the company obviously in the past, and just wondering where things stand at the moment.
If Mr. Chair, Baines Coaches were a member of the North East Bus Alliance, representing the smaller operators. I looked to Kirsty because I don't think Dougie Bain actually ever attended, although he was nominated as a representative. Kirsty will come in a little bit more info.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, he was a signed up member of the Quality Partnership and received all the communications, but never actually attended in person. I actually understand, and Ewan might be able to correct me, that process is still ongoing. We've got a meeting of the Bus Alliance Board in October, and I think it's likely that the implications for the membership of the board will be discussed probably more fully then.
Thank you, that's helpful. Look forward to hearing any outcomes from that deliberation. Thanks.
Okay, I see no more hands up, so if I take it, can we agree the recommendation that's listed on page 23, which is to note the progress on liaison arrangements with other RTPs, Scottish Government and others, and arrangements for future meetings? Happy. Okay. Item 4.2, equalities outcome, and it is Kelly Wilshire that's presenting, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is our regular equalities outcome and mainstreaming report that we report on biannually. This is Nestrans statutory duty under the Equalities Act 2010 that we need to look at evidence around our work, which is obviously the regional transport strategy, and set out a range of outcomes and what actions are needed to meet these outcomes. So the evidence that we look at is impact assessments that we did as part of development of the regional transport strategy, our monitoring that we do, regular monitoring, both nationally and locally, and also our consultants forum that we have as well. We have decided this year to keep our equalities outcome the same as 2021. This is due to still having some data gaps and the number of usual surveys and monitoring not being carried out during the pandemic. Also in 2023, a comprehensive travel study is being carried out, and this study should actually help us fill in the gaps. And actually the report on the comprehensive travel study will be going to board in our November Board. So hopefully we'll be able to fill in some of those gaps. We have 2 equality outcomes. The inequality that had been identified was that we currently have gaps in evidence for all protected characteristics, but in particular for race, religion, beliefs, gender, reassignment and sexual orientation. There is some evidence at a national level, but we don't have data at a regional level. So looking at that, we have come up with an equality outcome of evidence to provide better understanding of how all people and their protected characteristics in the northeast of Scotland travel and any inequalities they may face whilst travelling or trying to access transport. We right there how we are looking to do that, and of course the activities we've put in there is carry out this comprehensive travel study, which I've said is currently ongoing and we'll be reporting to Nestrans Board, and also it links to our RTS strategic priority of accessibility for all. The second equality outcome is the inequality of many people can experience difficulties accessing the transport network because of safety, cost, availability, connectivity, information available and assistance from staff. So the equality outcome we have chosen is everyone can access transport safely with an integrated service that provides accessible information, appropriate assistance and support from transport staff. And again, this links to our strategic priority of accessibility for all. And again, our activities are very much around this comprehensive travel study that's currently ongoing. As well as the equalities outcome, we also report on how we're trying to mainstream equalities within Nestrans as an organisation. So that is around the gender balance of the Nestrans Board, and we report this to the Scottish Parliament as well. As you can see there, as of last May, which is the reporting period we need to do for the Scottish Parliament, there were 8 males and 4 females, that's of substantive members, and excluding members nominated by partners, so the 2 councils and NHS Grampian, the gender balance is 2 males and 1 female. As an organisation that employs 9 staff, we are not required to report on the gender pay gap information because we're just too small, but we are asked to provide information where possible on gender and ethnicity. Again, because we're so small, we don't go any further than that. And again, I'm happy to take any questions. The recommendations for the report is to note the report and the requirements for Nestrans in respect to the Equalities Act 2010, approve the equalities outcomes for 2023 and note the report in Appendix 1. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Sorry, Councillor MacDonald.
More of a comment, really, Chair. I must commend Nestrans for some of the equalities work they have done in the past. I certainly know there was good involvement for elected members as well as others when we were putting together the regional transport strategy. I'm still happy with the 2 outcomes we have in front of us. I do just wonder though if some of those harder to reach elements, have we or can we further engage with the likes of GREC to get them to do some work for us, particularly around some of those more difficult ones? And also, are we going to look at, and I know we've looked at it more generally, at some of the recommendations from, for example, the Scottish Women's Budget Group, who are always on our case about making sure, particularly in transport terms, because a lot of public transport is, let's be honest, used by women, but there are also age considerations as well. But looking at some of what their recommendations are, and perhaps trying to weave some of that into how we do our work. But generally, I have to say it is good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. Yes, just to give you a very quick overview of the comprehensive travel study that I mentioned, we have been given match funding from Paths for All, Smarter Choices, Smarter Places Open Fund to carry out this piece of work. And over the last few months, we have done over 1,000 telephone surveys. There has been 6 focus groups done and a couple of extended interviews with people who have disabilities and access issues to transport. Those interviews, focus groups and telephone surveys were all weighted in terms of a representative sample across Aberdeen City and Aberdeenshire. So they were weighted in terms of age, gender, all of that sort of thing. So we could get as representative sample as we possibly could from those surveys. The focus groups also looked at, and this was part of the conditions of the grant from Pass for All, to really focus in on areas of SIMD, so Scottish Index of Material Deprivation. So we did some focus groups in areas that are 10% SIMD, so Peterhead, Fraserburgh and Aberdeen City. And that has given us some really interesting information that we wouldn't necessarily get from our general monitoring. And hopefully all of that information, which we'll be reporting to our next board, it's still in draft at the moment, unfortunately, will also help input into these equalities outcomes. And we will be publishing that report far and wide once we've got it. I'm really confident that this study is probably one of the most comprehensive it's been done in the country, actually, and we'll have this really good base of information that we can use in our monitoring report moving on as well.
Okay, I see no more hands, so I take it we all agree those recommendations as you stated earlier on page 31. Okay, moving on. Item 4.3, the draft annual report, and it's Jenny Anderson that's presenting this.
Thank you,
Please.
Chair. And good afternoon, everyone. Purpose of this report is to enable the board to consider a draft annual report for 22-23 and business plan for 23-24. The Transport Scotland Act 2005, under which regional transport partnerships were formally constituted, also requires each partnership to publish a report as soon as practically possible at the end of each financial year on the performance of its functions in that year. So this report is required to be submitted to Scottish ministers and constituent councils. A draft annual report for the 22-23 financial year has been prepared for consideration and is contained within the appendix. Since 2008, Nestrans has combined the business plan for the current year with the annual report, and therefore the business plan information for 23-24 is also included and is based upon the funding allocations and project proposals as they stood at the start of the current financial year, even though there may now be known revisions since that time. The forward for the report is normally agreed in advance with the chair, but as the Nestrans chair stepped down during the period that the annual report was being prepared, a forward has been drafted as an introduction, and the chair and vice chairs may specifically wish to consider the presentation of this forward. And the board is being asked to consider the attached draft 22-23 annual report and business plan for 23-24 and approve publication of this report on the Nestrans website once the design has been completed, and instruct a link to the published report to be sent to the Scottish ministers and the chief executives of Aberdeen City Council and Aberdeenshire Council. And I'm happy to try and answer any questions or to incorporate any changes or additions to the annual report that the board might want to make. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I'm just looking around to see if there's anybody with their hands up, but no, that's all good. Okay, then I take it we all agree with the recommendations as you stated. Agreed. Okay. So just sheet. Move on to item 4.4, which is public services reform, and it's Jenny again. You're presenting.
So yes, thank you. The purpose of this report is to enable the board to consider the information that's suggested for publication for 22-23 in accordance with the Public Services Reform Scotland Act 2010, as regional transport partnerships are included in the list of public bodies that the duties within the Act applies to. 3 statements are required to be published. The expenditure statement is contained in Appendix 1. and it's based upon information from finance staff in Aberdeenshire Council on all gross payments made by Nestrans in the period from 1st of April 2022 to 31st of March 2023. So this information differs from that in the accounts, as it might include payments relating to works that were undertaken in 21-22 if the invoices weren't received by the end of that financial year, and likewise it won't include the cost of works that were completed by the end of March 2023 if the invoices hadn't been paid by this date. Nestrans staff have considered which of the payments throughout the year fall within the stipulated items for publication, and have followed the guidance that as much information as possible should be published and to interpret the duties widely rather than narrowly. It's also necessary when expenditure falls under more than one category to report it under each heading, and so a comment has been added to draw attention to where this has been applicable. There is a wide range of payments that fall within the public relations category, and so as in previous years, these have been grouped under promotional subheadings within the expenditure statement in Appendix 1, and there are no members or employees receiving remuneration in excess of £150,000. Appendices 2 and 3 contain the draft sustainable economic growth and the efficiency, effectiveness and economy statements respectively. These contain much of the same information as within the previous draft annual report, which isn't surprising given that it pertains to the same period, but the guidance is clear that whilst it's possible to draw on other published material, self-standing statements are required, and the draft statements were therefore prepared on this basis and tailored to the requirements for these statements within the Act. So the board has been asked to approve publication of these statements on the Nestrans website to comply with the requirements of the Act. And again, I'm happy to try and answer any questions the board may have on the suggested publications.
Councillor MacDonald, please.
Do we have any idea who accesses this information? Or
this one, I don't know. It's just we're one of the listed bodies that have to prepare it, but I don't know if MD actually looks on our website for it. But we've always prepared it, so I don't know if MD checked for that.
Okay, I see no more hands up, so I guess we all agree the recommendation stated on page 95. Great. Okay. So our next item on the agenda is item 5.1. It's a freight issues update, and it's Paul Finch that's presenting.
Thank you very much, Chair. The report just provides an update on a variety of issues relating to the movement of freight and our involvement with that as Nestrans, particularly a focus on the Freight Forum event we held at the Maritime Museum on the 14th of September 2023. I was delighted that the Chair was able to attend, and Councillor Doreen Mayer was also in attendance, and I think Councillor Sandra MacDonald also was able to pop in for a period of time as well. Nestrans has had an involvement with freight and logistics industry for quite a long time. Pre-pandemic, that was often supported by a number of European grants and European projects. Clearly, the movement of freight and logistics is important for the economic well-being of the area. Freight and logistics is often a very vibrant commercial element, and so it is not like the public transport network where there is a very clear and obvious rationale for public sector involvement. Clearly, we like to see the involvement of freight as in assisting with research, bringing people together and making sure that the key issues that are raised by the freight industry can then be taken on in terms of policy responses to, say, Transport Scotland, Scottish Government or other economic bodies. I'm pleased to say that the Freight Forum carried a good overview of the current activities at three of the region's principal ports, the Port of Aberdeen, Peterhead Harbour, Peterhead Port Authority and Fraserburgh Harbour, each explaining their challenges, opportunities and plans for the future, and where possible focusing very much on the opportunity of the ScotWind allocations, which seems to be a particular focus or a theme of discussion amongst the forum. After a short break, we then moved on to hearing presentations on the work that the City Region deal commissioned on the A90, A952 corridor north of Ellen, linking up Peterhead and Fraserburgh. We also heard a presentation on some of the rail freight work that had been undertaken, also funded by the City Region deal. And then we also had an update on the road upgrade to Aberdeen South Harbour as well. I think generally amongst the floor, there was a good appreciation of the issues and quite a good networking event as well. It's the first time we'd held a face-to-face freight forum since prior to the pandemic as well. So it might be about 3 to 4 years since we've managed to achieve that. The paper also notes the official opening of Aberdeen South Harbour of the Port of Aberdeen, a very significant facility for the whole of the region, noting that an official opening is planned for Friday the 22nd, 2nd of September, with a public open day planned for the 24th of September. Throughout the whole development of the project, Nestrans officers have maintained close working relationships with the port due to the interface with projects such as Improved Coast Road Upgrade, the Energy Transition Zone and the Wellington Road Corridor. The recommendations are to note that the holding of the Freight Forum on Thursday the 14th of September notes the verbal update provided by myself at the board meeting, and also welcomes the opening of Port of Aberdeen's new South Harbour as a key contributor to the region's wider freight and logistics offering. Thank you very much, Chair.
Flick screens. Okay, I have a quote. I will let Councillor MacDonald in first.
It was more a comment, Chair. It was just that I did have a quick glance through the presentation that was sent out, and I thought it was something that would actually be really good to share with elected members, you know, wider than Nestrans perhaps. So maybe that's some consideration could be given to that. Thanks very much.
Take it, Mr. Finch, that nod is a yes, we can share it with all, or?
We've placed it on the Nestrans website, so it's publicly available, but probably what we could possibly do is via the committee clerks, make members of each council aware that it is there. And so perhaps that would be the way to do, to say if you have an interest in this, because I know that those members who are necessarily interested in some of those aspects don't always correspond with the traditional transport committees. So perhaps that's something we can work through with the committee clerks of both of the councils, just to raise that awareness. And perhaps that's also something that we can perhaps do social media on as well, and that might raise it to the wider industry as well about some of the presentations. And there were some really interesting facts that were in there, quite useful as well.
Okay, I will ask a few questions. Obviously, yes, I was there. I enjoyed it. I thought it was very interesting. I note you said we hadn't been able to run one for, say, 3-4 years. Obviously, I presume that's COVID related, etc. My question, first of all, is when would you think to run one again? Because I just found, just from the ports alone, it's actually quite an interesting update, just how they're looking at the freight and how they're looking at the future. And I'll tie it in with that to more road freight transport companies being present, etc. Just trying to get, you know, I felt it'd been interesting to see some actual presentation, just them actually talking about their challenges of getting A to B, etc.
Typically, when we had a series of running this, we found that running one once a year was sustainable in terms of generating enough topics to talk about and maintaining people's interests. We did try for a period one every 6 months, but because of the nature of the topics that were coming through, it found it quite difficult to sustain that level of novelty and interest for people to attend. Often it is information sharing and networking more than a decision-making body. So that felt about right at the time. So in my mind, I was around about trying to replicate it next year, but I'm flexible on that one. And yes, previously we had developed over a period of time good relationships with around about 6 road traditional road hauliers, and their input was very valuable. On this occasion, only one was able to turn up, although we did actually have positive responses from ASCO, Freelands, and I think there was one others, Nichols as well. So there was that interest there. And perhaps what we need to do in the intermediate time is perhaps go out and meet them and just spark that networking up again, and just to sort of bring them into the community and say, yeah, we are listening, this is interesting, because just sending out an invitation cold probably isn't the most effective. You've got to somehow try and rebuild that relationship that we previously did. So perhaps that's a challenge for me in the next 6 months or so, is trying to reconnect with some of these guys whom we previously had a relationship with, but that lack of face-to-face meetings probably dwindled away a little bit. So that's something we can take on board.
Okay, thank you. I see no more hands up, so I take it we all agree the recommendations. Okay. So I will move on to item 5.2, which is Aberdeen Rapid Transit Update, and it's Kirsty Chalmers is presenting, please.
Thank you. This is just quite a fairly brief update on the Aberdeen Rapid Transit project since the last board meeting in June. Members might recall that at that meeting, the board agreed a budget extension to the ART project to undertake an appraisal of routing options for ART, and that approval was given subject to appropriate funding being approved by Transport Scotland. And we also received an update that the detailed options appraisal had been submitted to Transport Scotland for gateway review. On the gateway review, that was submitted, and in the meantime, discussions really have been going backwards and forwards with Transport Scotland on that, on their comments and on their feedback, and we're working with them ongoing to try to agree the most appropriate way forward for that. The appraisal of the routing options, that at the gateway review, a separate funding request was submitted to extend that current phase of the project for that routing exercise, and I'm pleased to say that they've agreed that funding totaling 130,000 can be reallocated from the project management and contingency budget heading that had already been agreed through that initial BPF funding allocation. So that work has now commenced. Consultant Stantec, who are already working with us on ART, have commenced work on that exercise, which will look at and use some of the Assam model to test varying permutations of the high-level ART vision, which is 2 cross-city bus rapid transit routes, and there's a number of permutations within that high-level vision. So we'll be working through those options, undertaking some engagement with officers, elected members, bus operators and stakeholders on that, running some tests in Assam to provide us with that quantitative evidence in order to appraise them and provide the evidence base for hopefully a agreed desired ART routing and interchange points. The other strand of work through this is the engagement, marketing and communications. Recent activity on that has focused on a further round of engagement with stakeholders, particularly aimed at trying to identify potential advocates for bus and ART. And Jacobs have been working with us to contact a range of local businesses, major employers, trip generators on those 4 key radial corridors. As part of that, and to help us with that, those discussions, we've pulled together a handout which really details, I think, some of the sort of potential benefits that we think ART can achieve for the North East, including some examples of the benefits that have been achieved through other bus rapid schemes elsewhere. That handout is provided in Appendix A. I've also got some paper copies for those in the room if anyone wants one, and it is also now available on the Aberdeen Rapid Transit website. Going forwards, we'll continue to engage directly with stakeholders over the coming months, supported by social media and other awareness-raising activities. So the recommendations of the report really are just to note the commencement of work to appraise the routing options for ART, and also to note the ongoing stakeholder engagement work. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Councillor MacDonald.
Chair, I noticed from the previous report as well that we've spent quite a lot of money on stakeholder engagement, and I do have concerns, if I'm honest, that we're maybe not getting our message through. Particularly, there's been pockets. just, you know, from my own experience, businesses in King Street, for example, and others for whom it's, you know, it's seen as an absolute wrecking ball, which we, you know, we know it won't be, and we know that, you know, the benefits are there, but we need to somehow try a bit more to get that positive message about Aberdeen Rapid Transit through, I think, over the next while. And given, you know, the other difficulties we're experiencing in the city, and I can't speak for the Shire with changes to our city centre management, I think it's even more, you know, necessary now to actually get that message across.
Yes, I agree. I mean, I think, yes, there was a substantial budget for engagement, marketing and comms that came through that initial award. We've done, I think, quite a range of activities under that heading in terms of the sort of brand development and the market research, as well as a number of engagement and business events going forward. But absolutely, that needs to continue, and we're making the case with Transport Scotland, and that was an integral part of the funding bid for the next stage, is to continue funding for engagement, and not just the sort of statutory engagement that's required as part of appraisal processes, but real awareness raising. And I think there's a need to tie it all into the bigger message of where things are going and what the plan is for the future. So yeah, I agree.
Councillor Davidson. Isabel.
Yeah, thanks. It is really on that and about the wider messaging, because I haven't seen anything about art in the Shire at all. You know, it's not, it maybe is there, but it's not getting out perhaps like it could be. And I think it could be quite difficult to get that message out, because I don't know that the Shire sees itself with a good enough connection to this system. And we need to start now looking at how the whole thing connects up, rather than having something in the Shire that misses what's happening in the city at the same time. So there does need to be that good connection and understanding of why it would be better throughout the region. You know, you've got another 260, 270,000 people that we could attract and improve journey times for them, but we're not telling them anything about it. So it would be good if we could keep pushing that message out.
Yes, I agree, and I think it's a challenging message for the Aberdeenshire residents. We've held a number of briefing sessions that have been open to Aberdeenshire councillors, and trying hard to engage on the we've focused at this point in time on some of the businesses that would be directly affected by some of the bus priority improvements, but I think that message is key across the whole region to try and communicate those benefits for Aberdeenshire residents. What does this mean for them? So we will be working with Jacobs and that going forwards to try and continue putting that message out there. And I take your point about maybe trying to focus on that a little bit more.
Okay, I see no more hands asking questions, so I take it then we'll agree the recommendations. Yes, okay, so thank you. And the next item on our agenda is item 6, and it's the action plans active travel update, and it is John Barron that's presenting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. The purpose of this report is to update board members on various projects that I'm involved in, supported by colleagues and officers across both councils and external partners. It's a lengthy paper, so I'll surprise a few in the room by trying to be as brief as I can. First topic that I was keen to discuss or highlight to yourselves was the Active Travel Transformation Fund. Members will recall that previously reported that the councils and Nestrans had been invited to apply to this fund, which in Transport Scotland's words had set out to accelerate the pace of change and scale of active travel projects being delivered across the country. Both councils and Nestrans were informed at the last board that we had been unsuccessful in our bids, and council officers and ourselves have now had a feedback from the consultants appointed by Transport Scotland. The scoring summary table is there for your information. It can be seen that no one in the North East performed particularly well, hence no awards. And I thought it important to stress to yourselves that probably the first thing I would say, I have no issue with the kind of scoring that's been awarded. In fact, in places I think they've actually been quite kind to us, but in order to be successful at future iterations of the fund, we need to do a lot of work across the North East, and we need to do a lot of work in partnership across the North East to improve future bids. That said, whilst not overly critical of the scoring, it does seem to be in a hastily arranged process. And in fairness to Transport Scotland officers and the consultants, it was we didn't have a lot of information to our hand when making the bids and preparing the detailed assessments. A lot of the evaluation, or most of the evaluation, appears to have been respectively prepared after the bids have been submitted. So the kind of goalposts were being moved after we had sent our bids off. So it will become clearly, well, it's clear now that it will become more important in future years. It's referred to twice in PFG, and Transport Scotland and the consultants have highlighted a number of aspects that they'd be keen to see in future bids in order for the bids to be successful. Moving on to network planning, there's kind of two aspects which are running alongside each other. In January, ACOM was commissioned to support ourselves and partners to develop a regional on-road signed cycle network, including route planning, signage proposals, and the assessment of benefits. We now have that final report. It was overdue, but we now have it, and I've added some aspects which I think, in summary, highlight the fact that as we all kind of knew, the evidence would be that this would be something that is very worthwhile to do, and it needs to be progressed as other parts of the country have done, and we kind of need to get on and kind of design it. The specimen routes, I haven't detailed them here specifically because they were just done as examples to kind of prove the concept, I suppose you could like. So more work needs to be done on that. Alongside that, there's a more regional piece, which the consultants were appointed more recently in June, and that was to develop and confirm proposals for three-pronged active travel network for the North East, strategic regional connections, primary and secondary connections within Aberdeenshire's main towns, and primary and secondary connections within the Aberdeen City Council area. This bit of work is being progressed, and we have now established with the consultants the kind of ground rules and objectives for the study and what we're hoping to achieve. And it's still early days, but it is something alongside the quiet route network that I just mentioned, is then mentioned in the section headed number 4, which is the active travel action plan, which is a daughter document to a regional transport strategy. Although written in December 2014, it contains aims to develop a strategic network of active travel routes linking Aberdeen City and the main towns in Aberdeenshire. And it goes on to expand on that. So what's being done in the regional piece and the quiet route network is something that was mentioned back in December 2014 when that document was published. It's safe to say now that ACTRAP, as a long-term document, is long overdue a thorough review to see how we've got on with what's happened since then, and to see if it is still current and relevant fully for us now moving on. There are many, as members will all be aware, documents in the active travel arena that have been issued since December 2014, and with everything that's happened in the world and continues to, I think it's long overdue that we need to change, to review and reassess and develop ACTRAP, so it's a better place for moving forward. We did commission consultants in January to undertake a high-level review of ACTRAP as it stands, and they came up with quite a number of recommendations and suggested next steps, which are there for members to see. And there are also a number of recommendations that they have said. I think in very quick summary, as I now tail off, there's lots of work to do, and much of it should have been done long before now. And I will end there, Chair, and I'll let others discuss section 5.
Thanks, Chair. Just on the governance, the board had previously asked us to have a look at governance around active travel, just to say that I think the lessons on the Active Travel Transformation Fund are being learned, that if we worked collaboratively, sharing information across Aberdeen City, Aberdeenshire and Nestrans, it would make us in a stronger position, and that's something we will look at going forward. We've now established the group to take forward the ACTRAP review, which Paul is working with colleagues across Aberdeen City and Aberdeenshire, and there's certainly an intention that we will work more collaboratively going forward. So hopefully that takes us forward.
Yeah, I did see Glenn, you put your hand up. I took it down again. But did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, you'll not be surprised. I actually want to ask quite a few questions, but I thought we were going to move on to something else first and then ask questions. That's why I took it down. But I'll just go ahead just now. So thankfully, Rab's indicated a little bit there about what we're going to learn, etc. It's incredibly disappointing that our applications were not successful at all. So I was going to ask about, we need to learn and learn quickly, so we don't miss out next year. So, what are we going to do specifically to learn from this process? Will we be speaking to other councils that were successful? It's disappointing that nothing was successful in the northeast of Scotland. This is a huge amount of money that is going to get larger and larger every budget year, and we need to tap into it and be successful. So that's questions number one. On quiet routes, there's no mention of how many routes are going to be in this network. There's a trial that went on in Aberdeenshire last year of 3 routes, and I believe they were successful. So I'm interested to see how extensive the network going to be. And also, if you bear with me a wee second, I've got to jump screens. I'm not the best at this. 3.1.10 on page 134, it says, once initial signage is installed, it is considered that further steps could include consideration of reducing speed limits, installation of walking and cycle-friendly road signage, implementation of connecting infrastructure, etc., with promotion and marketing. So my question is really this. I know that Perth and Kinross have been very successful with this. They didn't wait around and install a whole load of signs and then later on go back and then reduce the speeds, etc., right from the offset to make it a friendly and attractive place for people to go walk, cycle. They identified routes whereby maybe there's 2 routes that are going to one place. So they made one route, the quiet route. They reduced the speed down to 40 miles per hour. They made it welcoming for those active travel people. And those in motor cars were then drawn to the one where they could drive at 60 miles an hour. So I'm confused as to why we're going to go to the expense of putting all the signs up, etc., and then maybe consider later on reducing speed. If we wanted to make it successful, in my opinion, you have to try everything you can right at the very start to actually draw people to it. I mean, I know loads of people out in rural areas that would like to go and cycle, etc., but they're very fearful of the speed of traffic, etc. So right from the start, I think we need to move that way. There's that on that one, and also, and people are probably very sick of me asking this, and I ask it almost every Nestrans meeting. Where is the overarching map of our active travel? What we have, what we plan, all the dates. It has been repeatedly said that it is coming, and yet it never comes.
Bob.
Thanks, Councillor Reid. It's certainly things we can have a look at. We're working particularly closely with Aberdeenshire on the quiet route signing and linking it, I think, to the trials that were done previously. There were 3 trials done in Aberdeenshire on I guess what you're referring to there as the slow routes for active travel taking priority. In terms of a map, that will be a key outcome of the work that's mentioned under section 4 there. So I think we will be looking to bring forward an active travel action plan, which includes maps at a strategic level, not necessarily down to the detail of design, but the strategic overview across the region of where are the primary routes, which ones can be under the quiet roads and which ones would have to be investment in off-road and segregated routes. So a piece of work that's kicked off now, and we hope to bring something back to you fairly shortly.
Rob, sorry, if I could just come back. When you say fairly shortly, you know, I have been on here for over a year now, and I have asked almost every time. So could I get a date? Or I mean, I've got loads of people in that are active cyclists, etc., that keep asking, wanting to know what developments are, when they're coming, where we're meeting up, etc. And you know, I know it's coming, but it just seems never to come. And I don't really want to put pressure on. I don't mean to, you know, sound like, you know, well, frustrated. I am very frustrated. But you know, when can we truly say to members of the public that we expect to have this?
Yeah, I mean, certainly I would hope we'd have something to members before the end of this year. So we've got 2 further meetings this year. So if not November, then December. But I think I would rather bring something to the board for discussion. So even if it's not finalised, I think we should put something in front of you and get your feedback so that it can be developed further. So even if it's not the final version, let's say we'll bring something back to the board before the end of the year.
Appreciate that, Rob. Thank you.
Okay, I see no more hands up, etc. So I take it and we're going to agree the recommendations as they are right now. Okay. All right, moving on to item 7. Progress report, and it's Rab again. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The progress report is an update of all of the items within our regional transport strategy and the other developments that are being brought forward. We only put to members the areas where there has been a change. So the change from the text in the previous meeting is indicated in bold within your papers. We've also recently added a red, amber, green to try and bring to members' attention where there hasn't been the progress that we maybe hoped for. All of the items really are there for information, for discussion, and welcome any comments back. But it's not the intention to provide a full update on all of the aspects of the regional transport strategy within this report. There has been questions about whether a bit more detail could be provided, but I think we found that quite difficult in terms of it's already a 48-page report, and if we were to provide the detail of what was in previous board papers, that would double or increase even more in so doing. So we're hopeful that members are getting the information that's required, i.e. changes to each of the projects since the last board meeting, and still looking at opportunities to improve that for members' information.
Okay. Councillor Mayor Doreen, please.
Thank you. And Rob, this is not a reflection on you at all, but under page 161, we have bus to affordability and accessibility. And it does point out that Stagecoach, who I am specifically interested in because they're the ones that deal with my area, have increased prices to cover operational costs. What it doesn't say is they have reduced services as well. So not only are they not meeting an affordability threshold, but they're not meeting an accessibility threshold either. My inbox is absolutely full with people who have missed connections, who say the service is a disgrace. And it's going backwards. We're trying to get people onto public transport and it's not working. Because to get a family, say, of 2 adults into Aberdeen for the day, in an hour and 40 minutes it takes to get from, say, Fraserburgh to Aberdeen, that's a huge chunk out of anybody's Saturday. It's cheaper to take your car. Even if you pay for your parking in Aberdeen, it's cheaper to take your car. We are not going to get people to use public transport this way. And the service level that they're also producing is to put things like town service buses onto an hour and 40 minutes. To get somebody to get into an appointment in Aberdeen, ARI is practically impossible unless you're using up a whole day to get there. So the status is green, which I presume is for the work that you've been doing. However, on the accessibility and affordability aspect of it, I would say it's now red.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Thanks for the comments, and certainly something we can look at. I should perhaps emphasise that although we work with the two operators through the North East Bus Alliance, that the things that we really don't discuss with them are fares, which are obviously a commercial decision. And to be honest, they won't discuss fares with the other in the room, far less with Nestrans and the councils in the room. It's very much a commercial decision by two commercial operators. There is an opportunity for local authorities to step in and subsidise where a service might be lost, but obviously the constraints on financing the local authorities has made that increasingly difficult over the recent years as well. So through the Bus Alliance, we look at opportunities to improve public transport bus services across the city and Aberdeenshire. We look at ways in which we can promote, ways in which we can support through infrastructure or funding, such as in bus shelters. But at the end of the day, the issues you raise concern us, but are very difficult for us to do more than influence. I should perhaps mention that First Aberdeen, on the base, I think, of the success of the bus priorities in the city centre, have announced a trial fare reduction over the next 3 to 6 months, and that's something particularly welcome. Stagecoach, on the other hand, I think are struggling in some parts of the region, particularly with recruitment, which I understand is one of the issues relating to making it difficult for them to provide more or even adequate services. And perhaps there's a bit of work that needs to be done, not just in promoting buses, but actually promoting bus driving as a career, for example, and thinking about some of the real constraints that there are in public transport and what the problems are that can be addressed. We've supported, in partnership with Aberdeenshire Council, the appointment of a rural transport development officer on I think a 2-year period, and we're hoping to bring back some thoughts on some of the rural aspects that I think you were referring to, about how difficult it is to make commercial services operate across a predominantly rural or dispersed area. That's something that obviously we're looking at. I can only say this is a problem that's going on across the whole of the country, Scotland, and as I understand it, the UK. And when the chair and I were at the meeting of all of the regional partnerships, the concern about declining bus services and network is a concern across all areas of the country. I know that doesn't make it any easier, but you know it's not just us, it's not just Buchan, it's across the country.
Councillor Davidson, Isabel.
Very much. Yeah, I absolutely echo what Doreen said. That there was a time very recently that Stagecoach decided that they couldn't maintain the services around my ward, and we had to step in and support them, and that was sore, I think, was the best way of putting it. It was very troublesome, and it's not ideal yet, but it's better than what was offered originally. So, but it, you know, it was expensive to sort out, and we can't keep that up. And I suppose bus companies can't keep it up either, really, because they have to have profitable routes, and getting enough people on buses to have profitable routes is really difficult for all sorts of reasons, including time and fares. So it's a vicious circle. Anyway, that's not really what I wanted to comment on in the first place. In this progress report, and I understand this is a progress report, and I presume it's because there's no progress, was the improvements to Inch Station. That's always been there, and it's in the equalities report. But did we never get a reply on the grant funding applied for improving or the attempt to improve the accessibility to Inch Station? And I see now there's a kind of a bundle along with Stonehaven and Inverurie, which is great. But that's a long time to not get a response.
Yes, it is a long time to not get a response. It's slightly complicated in that we have to submit to Transport Scotland, and they then put bids in on behalf of Scotland to the Department for Transport, because accessibility, as I understand it, is not a devolved issue. So Kelly, I know, has been chasing up at, but I'm afraid she's not going to nod her head, but I'll pass over to Kelly.
Yeah, it's all to do with the rail period. So they will get their funding for the next period, which starts in 2024 and goes on for 6 years. So we should know by the end of this year, and then they'll all be published. What are the projects for the next 6 years? So for the next rail period. So I'm hoping we will find out within the next couple of months. But yeah, we've basically been told we probably won't hear until the end of the year, beginning of 2024.
So if we don't,
but that's not just for Inch, that's for all of the accessible
yeah. So if we don't
station
get
projects,
that, we have to wait 6 years.
Or look at alternative funding.
Okay, I see no more hands up. We'll move on to item 8, publications and consultations, and it's Adam Kench that's presenting.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to inform members of recent publications and consultation responses that we have been involved in at Nestrans. First item I'm going to talk you through is the Cycling Scotland strategy. And Cycling Scotland is a national charity set up to represent cycles' interests. And in July, Cycle Scotland updated their strategy for the period from 2023 to 2028. Their vision and values remain unchanged, of a sustainable, inclusive and healthy Scotland where anyone, anywhere can enjoy all the benefits of cycling, and collaborative, inclusive, professional and evidence-driven, ambitious and sustainable, respectively. Cycling Scotland currently has 37 organisational members, and Nestrans is a member of Cycling Scotland. Cycling Scotland has set 6 strategic aims which will underpin their work and approach. Alongside, Cycling Scotland will assess progress by the sector as well as themselves through the following measures, which are listed in the report. Moving on to item 3, the road safety and cycling, what the evidence shows. The benefits of cycling on people's physical and mental health are well known. Over the next few years, the Scottish Government expects more people to choose more sustainable, affordable, cheaper and healthier ways to travel. However, it is clear that a corresponding rise in serious injuries or deaths to people cycling cannot be accepted. In order to help understand the causations behind collisions involving cyclists and provide a platform for evidence-led action, Cycling Scotland recently carried out analysis of the injury collision data gathered by police from collisions attended or reported to them that is published annually by Transport Scotland in Reported Road Casualties Scotland. As mentioned above, the police, in their own opinions, choose from a set of contributing factors, and the analysis of the contributing factors recorded by police for all collisions, which has resulted in fatal or serious injuries to people cycling between 2015 and 2021, was carried out to help provide a better understanding of who was at fault and what some of the common causes of these collisions were. The analysis also revealed that the main contributing factors in collisions attributed to drivers and riders are listed in the report: failing to look properly, failing to judge other people's path or speed, being careless, reckless or in a hurry, a poor turn or manoeuvre, disobeying give way or stop sign or marking. Cycling Scotland believes the official data does help challenge some common myths about people on bikes, particularly about the cause of collisions and how to reduce the likelihood of severity of the collisions. Poor driving or riding standards are a much more significant cause of collisions, and it would therefore be ineffective to prioritise action primarily on what someone cycling wears rather than improving road user behaviour. The key finding of this analysis are, between 2015 and 2021, 54 people cycling were killed, and a further 1,836 people were seriously injured in road collisions in Scotland. In collisions between bicycles and vehicles, the person driving the vehicle is more often at fault, with 73% of factors contributing to a collision are assigned to the driver. Collisions resulting in serious injury to people cycling happen in every part of Scotland. And wearing dark clothing while cycling is not a common cause of serious collisions, and engineering, education and enforcement measures are critical to reducing fatal and serious injuries in collisions involving people cycling. And Cycling Scotland states that these actions need to be prioritised across Scotland now, and this will help the long-term goal of the Scottish Government's Vision Zero strategy, where no one is seriously injured or killed on our roads by 2050. Moving on to item 4 is the Young Persons Free Bus Travel Scheme Evaluation Stakeholder Survey, and Nestrans were invited by Transport Scotland to participate in this. A copy of the response submitted by Nestrans can be seen in Appendix A, and the submission picked up on some of the issues that we've talked about previously in this meeting today about access to buses, and then there's also not just access to buses in rural areas, but access to buses in urban areas, and how the Aberdeen Rapid Transit vision will hopefully help to create a step change in public transport vision within the city and beyond. Moving on to item 5, the UK Parliament Scottish Affairs Committee had an inquiry into cost of living in rural Scotland, and Nestrans were asked to contribute to this inquiry. And Nestrans, in their response, picked up on a range of issues in which transport has influence on cost of living, and the response explored the following issues which are listed, which are as follows: the challenge of our rural geography, the challenge of providing public transport and linked to forced car dependency, the COVID-19 impact, the cost of public transport to users and suppliers, the cost of car use, and the impact of accessibility to key services. The response can be found as Appendix B to this report, and it was submitted to the committee on the 11th of July. Finally, moving on to item 6, the Scottish Government have arranged 3 papers on just transition, which are discussion papers which would help as they sort of develop their Just Transition Action Plan and route map, which should be published later this year or early into next year. And as part of this discussion, the Scottish Government open to receiving correspondence on the discussion papers, and it was felt it would be valuable for Nestrans to compose a response in relation to the discussion points made in the transport sector discussion paper. A draft response is contained as Appendix C to this report, and this response focuses on the 4 themes that are identified in the paper and applying the discussion points raised to the context of the North East of Scotland. The response raises challenges and opportunities we have when it comes to having a just transition in the transport sector in the region. Item 7 is the Scottish Parliament's Social Justice and Social Security Committee are running an inquiry into child poverty and parental employment, and Paul Finch, the Nestrans Strategy Manager, through his position as Chair of SCOTS, who are the Society of Chief Officers of Transportation in Scotland, Transportation Working Group, was invited to contribute to the Social Justice and Social Security Committee at the Scottish Parliament, who are conducting the inquiry. A written submission can be found through the link within the board paper, and this was submitted to committee on the 29th of August and touched on the subheadings above. A large aspect of access issues for parents revolves around car dependence, particularly in rural areas, and the risk of a car dependence for those without a car and to the wider national transport system. Public transport is currently facing difficulties both in patronage levels and funding. If this continues, car dependence will grow, and the financial burden of this could increase for lower income families. It is important for trip requirements of parents to be correctly understood and to think about how improvements can be made to mitigate some of these challenges. During the committee session, for which Paul attended, the affordability of the transport system was also considered in detail, with discussion focusing on the current concession system, the impact of the pilot peak fares, which were discussed earlier, and other wider support for low-income families. Finally, item 8 is the women's experience of travel and its costs, and the Scottish Women's Budget Group published a survey recently called Women's Experience of Travel and Its Cost, and a full copy of the report can be found within the board paper. It has highlighted that transport is a gender issue, which was again mentioned earlier in this meeting, and this needs to be taken into account when decisions are made on transport. Thinking about how they interrelate with parents and their role in dropping their kids off at school and trip chaining to achieve that. Also involved in this is the safety in terms of feeling safe while using public transport, and was an issue as well as the state of pavements. Pavements that were uneven can cause issues when pushing prams and traveling with young children. And there's a quote within the report which shows how this can impact on someone's safety. So just to conclude the report is the recommendations, and the recommendations are to note the publication of the documents outlined in the report, authorise officers to continue and to engage with partner organisations as these policy documents develop, and agree the draft response on the Just Transition Transport discussion paper contained as Appendix C to this report to be submitted on behalf of the Chair. I'm happy to try and take any questions, or one of the other members of the team will help me to do so. Thank you.
Okay. I see no hands. You're going to be lucky. No questions. Positive. Oh, so sorry. But my apologies. I didn't see your hand, Councillor MacDonald.
Yeah, it was just in the letter to the and under Just Transition. There wasn't any mention of the energy transition zone. Now, whilst that might, you could argue have more to do with economic growth and just transition. I think there is kind of a transport element in there as well, and I just wondered if that might be something we can maybe add in. And I mean, there have been further sort of hydrogen initiatives as well, so maybe just to flesh that out a bit, but just a thought.
Yeah, between us and the team, I think we can take a look at that.
Could I just suggest perhaps we make some amendments and circulate that around to get that final approval, if that's okay?
I'm happy for the chair to, I think you're going to sign it off anyway, but I'm happy. You would like to see the final? Okay, fine.
That's fine.
Okay.
We will do that. There's not a specific deadline. I think if we do this in the next couple of weeks, that should be fine.
Okay. With that addition, the rest of the recommendations, I take it as all agreed, etc. That I am. Okay. Microphone. So we have item 9, information bulletin, and it's Kelly again, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is purpose of the report is just to provide information and updates for the board on a number of matters that don't require decisions. So for our press and communications, for the benefit of the chair who's new to Nestrans, each board we do a summary of the press inquiries that we've had and the media releases as Appendix 1 to the report. We give an update on our Get About partnership. The Get About partnership is a large partnership of around 17 organisations across the northeast of Scotland. And whenever any of us do any sustainable transport promotion, we use Get About as our sustainable travel brand rather than having lots of logos over everything. And this brand has been going for over 10 years. In fact, I think it's about 14 years now, and is very much around promoting the safe and more sustainable modes of transport, such as walking, cycling, public transport and car sharing. So over the summer, we did some promotion, particularly around active travel and using shared spaces. We did that on social media and on the radio. We're currently doing some work to progress a winter promotional campaign promoting public transport, and I think that probably fits in with some of the comments we've had about earlier papers about trying to encourage people in terms of getting back onto bus and getting back onto rail. And also what I haven't put in here that we have just finished doing is we've also just created a new radio advert to promote the Think helpline, which is the helpline that Rab mentioned in his director's report around the Health and Transport Action Plan, and where people can phone up to get help around how they're going to travel to their health and social care appointments. So that should be going live on Original FM within the next couple of weeks. As many of you may be aware, the campaign for North East Rail successfully received funding support from the Just Transition Fund to undertake a feasibility study looking at options for rail along the transport corridor from Aberdeen up to Peterhead and Fraserburgh. And with agreement of the Scottish Government, the Aberdeen and Grampian Chamber of Commerce are acting as clients for this study along with CNER, and following a competitive tender exercise, a joint team comprising of Stantec and AECOM have been awarded this work, and that was formally launched at the end of August. Officers from Nestrans will be providing technical support and advising on this, and we are planning to do this throughout the duration of the study. CNER also came along to the Freight Forum last week as well. And as we reported to the June 2023, we'll also be looking at this as part of the City Region deal as well, and coordination of the two streams of work will be a key requirement. We also wanted to update the board around a student work placement that we have recently co-supervised along with NHS Grampian. And again, this was part really around the Health and Transport Action Plan work we've been doing. This was a 10-week work placement for a master's student at the University of Aberdeen. And the piece of research was titled Transport Considerations and Appointment Scheduling, an Evidence Collation of Health Service Accessibility in Rural Aberdeenshire, Scotland. And this was looking at appointment scheduling from the clinics rather than the patients, and whether clinics take into account the rural nature of people when setting appointments. The research highlighted 5 recommendations, one of which was around incorporating detailed transport information appointment letters. So that would be around promoting the Think helpline. And of course, that was part of the reason why we decided to do another radio ad to again help promote the availability of this support. Officers have also been supporting a different student from Aberdeen University's Sustainable Transitions MSc course with their dissertation, studying the impact of under-22's concessionary bus pass travel on choices and intentions. And that work, once it's ready, will be presented to the North East Bus Alliance. We've also got some information here around the e-bike hire scheme that was launched in November last year, Big Issue e-bikes. There are a couple, or in fact, more than a couple, 4 graphs here looking at registrations to the app, active users, the number of rents, and how long people have been renting these bikes for. As you can see from the graphs, it really has been an upward trajectory from when it started in November last year, right up until information there we've got up until the end of July, which is very positive, and we're very pleased that we have seen an increase in the number of people registering for the app, actually using it, and how often they're using it and the length of time they're using it as well. So long may that continue. And finally, we have an update on the Verity House Agreement, which was an agreement between COSLA and the Scottish Government in terms of partnership working, and sets out to underpin the New Deal for Government established in May 2022, and to try and reset the relationship between local government and central government. The underpinning of the agreement is very much around tackling poverty, especially child poverty, transforming our economy through a just transition, and delivering sustainable, person-centred public services. And one of the principles is very much local by default, national by agreement. And the recommendation is for the board to note the contents of this report, but I am happy to take any questions.
Michael.
Yep, thank you, Chair. It was just on the Big Issue e-bikes. I'm pleased to see the success of that since it was launched. I'm just noting in particular it states the number of parking zones has increased from 33 to 58. had a wee look online to kind of see where those zones are. I'm noticing it's now starting to stretch farther and farther along the Deeside Way, all the way up to Miltimber now. Just as we get a wee bit further, we start stretching into Aberdeenshire potentially. Is that something that would be allowed under the scheme? Could we potentially see the e-bike schemes moving into Aberdeenshire, potentially through the Deeside Way or through other means?
Thank you. At present, I think the contract is with Aberdeen City Council, so it would really only be within the Aberdeen City Council boundaries, but it is something I'm sure it could be looked at if Aberdeenshire Council were interested in extending it further. But certainly at the moment, the current contract is just for Aberdeen City.
Okay, I see no more hands. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering again on the e-bikes, and it's great to see the use going up that quickly, but I understand that in other places they've kind of failed a bit. So is that the same trajectory that they went through? Did people get excited and start using them and then stop, or are we likely to be more sustainable here?
I don't know about the other ones, I'm afraid, but certainly at the moment we're going in this upward trajectory, and we can just hope that we'll continue to be able to do that and be sustainable in the long term. I'm aware that others have failed, but I don't know what their initial trajectories or data is.
Okay. Yes, I see no more hands, so thank you for that. I note the recommendation, and we'll move on to item 10, conferences and presentations. Rab, please.
Thanks, Chair. Just for noting, really, we always do a report informing members of conferences we've attended or forthcoming conferences coming up. In particular, it's there to let members, I suppose, ask for feedback if appropriate, or to alert you if there are conferences that you feel any individual members would wish to be involved in. There's a couple there recently, presentations that Nestrans have undertaken, both by Paul. Adam already mentioned the inquiry into child poverty and parental employment, and we've already discussed the Freight Forum meeting which was held, but just for noting, really.
Okay. All right, with that, we will move on to item 11. And that's Rab again. Pending.
Thank you, Chair. Yep. Again, a standing item, we always report on pending business and give an indication of reports which will be coming to the following meetings. Number listed there, we've mentioned comprehensive travel survey. We're hoping to get that to today's meeting, but very optimistic that it will be a full report to the November meeting. The audited annual accounts, we will update the board on when we are in a position to formally bring that before you. Next meeting, I think we'll also be looking at dates for board meetings during 2024, in addition to the ones mentioned there.
Okay, I'm just looking around. I don't see any hands, so yes, with that, I think that's all our business for today completed. I thank everybody for attending. And if we could, I guess, stop the recording, if that's appropriate. Thank you very much.